right, welcome back to the deep dive. This time we're going to be talking about NVIDIA and their upcoming earnings call. Specifically, we want to answer the question, what does Jensen Huang need to say to investors to get them back on board, to get them excited about NVIDIA's future? And we're going to look at some notes from financial analysts who are also NVIDIA shareholders, so they're pretty invested in this. We're going to be talking about things like AI economics, the Jevons paradox, the whole frenemy dynamic with these big companies building their own chips. And, of course, U.S.-China relations, which always seems to be there. To help us break this down today, we've got our expert.
Hi.
What do you think makes this a make-or-break moment for NVIDIA?
Well, NVIDIA's stock price has been kind of flatlining since June of last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And these analysts, they're looking for signs of continued growth from NVIDIA. So their notes are kind of a roadmap for us to unpack both the good and the bad for the company.
Okay, so what are some of the things these analysts are worried about?
The big one is sustainability. Can NVIDIA keep up this incredible growth they've had? The demand from hyperscalers, like those massive data centers that power everything we do online.
Right.
That seems strong for now, but long term, there are some concerns.
Yeah.
Like that report about Microsoft scaling back on data center leases.
Oh, yeah, right. I saw that.
Investors want to see proof that NVIDIA can keep going strong despite these potential bumps in the road.
So basically, it's not just about what's happening now. What's the plan for the future?
Exactly. Then there's the question of Blackwell, NVIDIA's new chip architecture for AI and high-performance computing. There have been some supply chain issues, and investors are looking for evidence that production is increasing, and those issues are going away.
So they basically want to see that the money they've invested is going to pay off in the long run.
Right. NVIDIA has spent a ton of money on capital expenditures, and investors need to be convinced those investments will create returns.
Yeah, of course.
Not just this year, but in the future.
It's like, show me the money, basically.
Yeah.
But it gets more complicated, right? We can't forget about U.S.-China relations and how that might play into this. Could further restrictions on U.S. chip exports to China hurt NVIDIA?
It's definitely a valid concern. These restrictions could potentially limit NVIDIA's access to a huge market.
Right.
However, even with these challenges, there are some reasons for optimism, and that's where things get really interesting.
Okay. Tell me more. What's the good news?
One intriguing aspect is the Jevons paradox in AI, an economic principle stating that increased efficiency leads to higher consumption.
Wait, so if something gets more efficient, people use more of it.
Exactly. Think about it. As AI models get more efficient, you'd assume they would need less processing power, but demand for training and inference is actually skyrocketing.
Ah, I see. So even though AI is getting smarter, the amount of work it's doing is increasing even faster.
Yeah. And this leads to another reason for optimism, inferencing. While everyone's talking about training AI models, the real growth potential is in how we use these models in everyday life.
Gotcha.
This is a huge opportunity for NVIDIA.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about Amazon integrating AI into Alexa. That's a perfect example of how powerful AI can be when woven into our lives. Amazon has a massive user base and infrastructure to make AI widely accessible.
Right. So NVIDIA's not just building the brains, but the whole nervous system of AI, right?
That's a great way to put it. But let's not forget about competition.
Yeah, of course.
Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are all developing their own chips. That has to be concerning for NVIDIA, right?
Yeah, it sounds like a big threat.
It is, especially in the inferencing market. But NVIDIA's strengths extend beyond GPUs. They have a platform approach that includes networking, software, and even liquid cooling.
Oh, I see.
All these elements work together to create a more efficient system.
So it's not just the individual chip, it's the whole package deal.
Exactly. This gives NVIDIA an advantage, especially in the training market, where the need for computing power is even greater.
So they're building the high-performance race car for the AI world.
You could say that. But we still have the U.S.-China rivalry looming. This adds a lot of uncertainty for NVIDIA.
It's like they're trying to build this amazing tech while walking a tightrope at the same time. How do they deal with that?
It's a balancing act. Companies like NVIDIA are constantly adapting to these changing global dynamics, trying to maintain their global reach while staying compliant with regulations.
Right.
It's a dynamic situation.
Okay, so we were talking about proprietary AI.
Right.
But what about open source AI models?
Yeah.
Is this a big threat to NVIDIA or just kind of a sideshow?
It's a good question, and the analysts are definitely thinking about this. Open source AI has the potential to change things, not just for NVIDIA,
Right.
but for everyone in AI.
Okay, for people who don't know, what exactly is open source AI?
Um,
And why is it causing such a buzz?
think of it like a recipe. Anyone can see it, change it, and use it.
Okay.
Open source AI models are made together by lots of people, and they're free for anyone to use. Companies don't have to start from nothing.
Yeah.
Or rely on big companies like NVIDIA.
So a company could build AI stuff using these open source models.
Yeah.
They maybe not even need NVIDIA.
Exactly. That's what could be disruptive. If open source models get good enough to handle those complex jobs that NVIDIA's chips do now, it could really hurt NVIDIA's market share.
Especially in inferencing, right?
Especially in inferencing, yeah.
But is open source AI really like a magic solution?
Well, no.
There's got to be downsides, right?
Of course. While it's cheaper, companies have to be careful about the quality and security of open source models.
Oh, right. Yeah. Makes sense.
They don't want to build their whole AI strategy on something that might be shaky.
And even if the model is good,
yeah,
they probably still need experts and maybe special hardware to make it work, right?
Exactly. It's not as easy as just plug and play.
Right.
You need skilled people and the right hardware to really make it work.
So it's not just open source takes over everything.
Right.
It's more complicated.
Yeah. It's more about how it changes the way AI grows and becomes available. Open source will be important, but it won't get rid of the need for the tech that NVIDIA makes.
So where does this leave NVIDIA? How do they stay ahead with open source growing?
That's a really important point. NVIDIA needs to show why they're still valuable.
Right.
Even with open source AI out there, they could focus even more on super powerful hardware and software, like pushing the limits of AI.
So it's like a race. They have to keep innovating to stay ahead?
Yeah, you could say that, but it's not just about power.
Okay.
They also need to play to their strengths in other areas, like networking and liquid cooling.
Right.
That's where they stand out from open source options.
Could they maybe work with the open source community?
Yeah.
Like help with projects or even make their own open source stuff?
That's a smart idea.
Yeah.
By being part of the community.
Right.
NVIDIA can stay relevant.
Okay.
It's about finding that balance between competition and working together.
So NVIDIA has to be flexible and keep changing to deal with this new AI landscape.
Yeah.
Open source is a challenge, but also an opportunity.
Exactly. It's about knowing that things are always changing and being ready to change with them.
Okay.
To stay ahead.
This has been really helpful in understanding what NVIDIA is up against. They're at a crucial point, facing both challenges and opportunities.
Definitely.
The upcoming earnings call is going to be really important.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what Jensen Huang says about all this and how he explains NVIDIA's vision for the future. What's he going to tell investors?
Yeah.
And how will he handle these challenges and grab those opportunities?
We'll just have to wait and see. But before we wrap up this part,
okay,
I have one last thought. We've been talking about open source AI as a possible threat to NVIDIA. But what if they saw it as an advantage? Could NVIDIA use open source to make their own products even better and reach more people? It's a risky idea, but it could change everything.
That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
It would take a big change in how they think.
Yeah.
But it could open up all sorts of new possibilities for them.
Definitely something to think about as we wait for those earnings call results. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here for the final part of our look at NVIDIA's future. The earnings call, the one we've been talking about, it just ended and, well, we're ready to dig into it.
Yeah.
What were the big takeaways?
Right.
What does this mean for investors and the whole AI world?
It was definitely a big event, and Jensen Huang did not disappoint.
Right.
He talked about a lot of the things we've been discussing, the challenges, and also the huge opportunities ahead for NVIDIA.
Yeah, he seemed pretty confident, you know. So what were the highlights? What really stood out to you from this call?
Well, he addressed those supply chain problems, especially with the Blackwell architecture.
Right. Their new chips for AI.
Exactly. He said they're really pushing to increase production, but he also suggested those supply problems might stick around a little longer than some people hoped.
Okay, so not a quick fix, but he's acknowledging the problem.
Yes.
And saying they're working on it.
Exactly. And then he talked about demand, emphasizing how strong hyperscale demand continues to be, especially from those big cloud companies.
Right.
He even addressed that report, you know, the one about Microsoft maybe cutting back on data centers?
Yeah.
He explained that it was more about Microsoft changing their cloud strategy, not really a sign that overall demand is weakening.
That's good to hear. I bet investors were nervous about that report.
Yeah.
So he tackled those concerns head on. But what about long-term growth? Did he give any hints about how NVIDIA plans to keep growing over the next few years?
Well, he talked about that Jevons paradox in AI.
Right, the idea that when AI gets more efficient, people actually use more of it.
Exactly.
I still find that a little hard to believe,
Yeah.
If AI is getting better and doing more with less, wouldn't demand level off eventually?
Well, that's the paradox.
Okay.
He argued that demand, especially for inferencing, is going to keep growing even faster.
Okay.
Think about all the ways we can use AI in different industries. Healthcare, finance, manufacturing, it's just endless.
So even if NVIDIA's chips get better, they could sell even more because people will be using AI for so many things.
Exactly. And that's where NVIDIA is focusing. He talked about how much potential there is in inferencing and how NVIDIA's platform approach, the GPUs, networking, software, everything,
Right.
it all gives them a big advantage.
He really wanted to make it clear that they're not just a chip company.
Right.
They're building a whole AI ecosystem, which is what sets them apart. What about the competition, though? Did he talk about those big companies building their own chips?
Yeah, he said it's a real challenge, especially in that inferencing market. But he thinks NVIDIA's platform approach, their expertise in AI and their partnerships give them an edge, especially for those really tough jobs like training those giant language models.
So he knows there's competition, but he thinks NVIDIA has the right plan to stay ahead.
Right.
What about U.S.-China relations, though? Did he say anything about that?
He said it's a complicated situation
Yeah.
and that there might be more restrictions on chips going to China.
Yep.
But he was optimistic that NVIDIA can handle the issues and keep doing business around the world. He talked about finding ways to work within the rules and keep innovating.
So he's being realistic about the challenges,
Yeah.
but not totally pessimistic either. Do you think overall he did a good job balancing, acknowledging the tough stuff while still being positive about the opportunities?
I think he did a really good job, yeah. He was honest about the challenges, but also made it clear he's confident in NVIDIA's ability to keep growing.
It seems like he did a good job reassuring investors. But what about that question we had about open source AI? Did he mention how those models might affect NVIDIA's business?
That's interesting. He didn't actually say anything specifically about open source.
You think maybe he did that on purpose?
Maybe.
Maybe to avoid worrying investors who might see open source as a threat?
It's possible. But by focusing on NVIDIA's platform and those really demanding AI tasks, it's almost like he's suggesting that open source has its place, but NVIDIA is focused on those who need the absolute best performance.
It is kind of a subtle strategy.
Yeah.
Focus on what you're good at and let open source do its thing.
Right.
But it still leaves that question, how is NVIDIA going to deal with open source in the future? Will they use it, work with it, maybe even contribute to it?
There's a lot of possibilities there. It'll be interesting to see what they do.
Well, this deep dive has really given us a lot to think about, hasn't it? We talked about everything from supply chain issues to U.S.-China relations, the growth of inferencing, and this whole open source AI movement.
Yeah, it's a lot.
The AI world is changing so fast, it's amazing to see how NVIDIA is leading the way.
It really shows you how powerful AI is and all the amazing things happening in this field. And it's really just the beginning.
That's the best part. It's only just getting started.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into NVIDIA's future. We'll be back soon with more explorations of the tech world. Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep asking those big questions.